Hello and welcome to another episode of Exploring Standards. I am your host, Jess, and today I have the absolute pleasure of talking to Neil Rutland, Associate Director and Architectural Technician at Carless Adams. How are you, Neil?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for joining me on the show today. So Carless Adams are a client of Assesnt, and they are currently certified in ISO 9001 Quality Management, and more recently, very recently, in fact, ISO 14001 Environmental Management. So in this episode, we are going to discuss Carless Adams ISO journey, including the implementation of both their standards, objectives, and benefits. But before we get into that, can you just tell us, our listeners, a little bit more about Carless Adams and your role within the company?
Yeah, of course. We are an architectural practice and have been around in various guises probably for about 70-ish years now. We've been Carless Adams for around 25, 30 years in one form or another. Over the last 20 years, we've specialised in the care sector. So anything within that, that umbrella, care homes, assisted living, some care villages, some units for young adults with brain injuries, that sort of thing. So anything that falls within that care sector. At one time we were a multidisciplinary practice. More latterly in the last 5 years, we've become just architecture. We are we're about 19 of us now. We're an equal mix between architects and technicians and some administration staff. Myself, I'm an architectural technician, joined the company about 9 years ago as a senior architectural technician. And through that journey, I've become part of the QMS and now EQMS team, and have become an associate director probably for the last 5 years. So, that's the company and that's me.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So my first question is, why did you decide to get an ISO certification? We'll get two in the end.
Yeah. So I think we had the first accreditation certification before I joined the company, as I say, which was 9 years ago. If I'm honest, I think at that stage it was probably something that was a client requirement and something that was, in all honesty, perhaps a tick box exercise. But we've seen the benefits of that within certainly my time of being there, and with the help of Assesnt, actually streamlined our system, and it's actually become something that, rather than had a document for everything and was just massive and rather cumbersome, is now really focuses on the management of the business and works as an efficient tool which the whole business now refer to, rather than it being something that was put in a series of binders and perhaps up on a shelf, which wasn't referred to. So I think I couldn't say for sure what the motivation was for getting 9001 originally, but I certainly can vouch for how it's improving and streamlining all of our process within the business, certainly over the last 5 or 6 years where I've been involved. The 14001 was kind of an organic process, really, in that as a practice, we've started to ask some of the questions of sustainability and environmental design within the care sector, which is notoriously quite a difficult sector to include a lot of the elements within that. So we produced a white paper about 2 years ago now, which, as I say, we don't profess to be experts, but we ask those questions. Then we looked sort of within ourselves a little bit as to, we're trying to promote this sustainable style of build in the sector that we're in, but as a practice, what are we actually doing ourselves in the way that we operate? So it seemed the next progression for us is to actually look at ourselves in the way that we do business and how can we do that more sustainably. So, and it seemed a little bit false to be sort of questioning what we do in the sector and then not be doing it ourselves. So it seemed a very natural decision to attempt to get that accreditation. And again, as you say, very recently as last week, we actually achieved that certification with the help of Kathy and the team at Assesnt. So we're absolutely delighted that we've got that now.
That's fantastic. I know you said about you weren't quite sure about ISO 9001, but tick boxing, which a lot of clients do come to us and say, "Oh, you need this." But it's really nice to hear you say, "Actually, we've seen the benefits of having this," and then a
Mm.
natural sort of progression to the getting ISO 14001, which once again, a lot of our clients do come to us and say, "Well, we think this is our next step." So we'll probably this will just be about ISO 14001 because obviously this is what you've been doing, but how have you found the implementation process?
Really smooth, really smooth. I think it helped that we had 9001, and we, as I say, we're not a manufacturer that's dealing with getting a lot of materials in and plastics and trying to source a lot of suppliers and then trying to understand how they work and do they fit within the umbrella that we would like to operate. So it was more a modification and actually just sort of formalizing a lot of the things that we've already done. I mean, we've just done a refurbishment of the office, and before we started getting 14,001, and in that we started to look at energy efficient light bulbs and PIRs on all the light rooms that we don't use and all of those sorts of things. So when we were having the audit last week, we were kind of like, damn, we've already done so many of these things that actually we can't put those in as objectives for what we want to achieve. But the process itself, I mean, we decided to sort of press the button in January, and I couldn't have said it had gone much smoother. Really, we sat down with Kathy and had a couple of sessions with it's not just me that does it. We've got a team in the office that all sit within the EQMS umbrella. So we sat with Kathy. We went through all the documents. She helped us write some of the documents, make sure what we had were adjusted in the right way. And we had our first, I think it's a scoping interview that they do with us. ISO did with us, and that went very well. Gave us the confidence to go into the actual audit itself with some confidence that we were in the right place. We had another internal audit about a week before. I always like to do that, have our internal audits just a week before, so Kathy could come and look through and make sure we're still doing everything that we say we should be, and get us in that confident place to have an interview, an audit. So yeah, I really couldn't speak highly enough of how the process went.
Fantastic, thank you. That's wonderful to hear. And now I know you kind of briefly just touched on this with Kathy, who was your consultant from Assesnt, and doing internal audits and giving you the confidence to go for your certification. But how does having an ISO consultant help you?
Personally, and as a practice, I don't think we could do it without them. To be quite honest, certainly I'd be a lot bolder than I am. There is some hair there, but it'd be nigh on impossible. Certainly for us as a practice with a small team in it, and not particularly having any experts in having got accreditations. Whilst it's very easy to have a lot of internal audits and make sure we're in the right place, and then go into the external audit, to actually implement a whole new system yourself, certainly I would have found very daunting. So to actually give that reassurance and the confidence of just having the checks and the internal audits that give you, I certainly don't think we could have done it without, to be quite honest, and I would recommend that to anybody.
Wonderful, thank you. So can you tell us a bit about your current objectives?
So we actually call them charters at Carless Adams. So
can I ask why?
Yeah. As the QMS team, quite often we'd sit, I also obviously sit on the management team, and I'd say, come on, let's get some objectives together. And what should we do? What should we do? What should we do? And actually, the senior management team sat down 2 years ago and looked at a whole vision for the practice. Where do we want to be in the next 3 years? Doesn't reach any further than 3 years, but rolls every year. And they presented those to the rest of the management team, myself included. And I kind of looked at what they were talking about, and I said, my goodness, what you've produced there is a whole list of objectives. You're calling them charters, but what you've produced is a list of objectives. So, and within that, even before we'd started the ISO 14001, there was things in there about just waste management and trying to operate as a greener practice. And so it was kind of perfect, the list that they pulled together. So perhaps having objectives originally, I'm talking a few years ago now, it was quite hard to actually pin people down and say, okay, well, I need some objectives for this year. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? But then it just came about organically. I think, as I talked about earlier, about people becoming more comfortable with the 9001 documentation, and actually, rather than it just being that book on the shelf, they actually started encompassing and really living in the system and understanding what we were doing. So kind of that whole vision and analysis of what we wanted to do going forward as a practice kind of just dropped into place. And I was more than happy that they called them charters rather than objectives. So it kind of, that's great. We're doing the right thing here. So that's why they are different. We've probably got a couple too many at the moment, but every sort of, there's an objective, at least one objective for every, what we sort of call the sort of 7 pillars of the business. So where we look at the office environment, the environmental standards, the sales, the marketing, all of those sorts of things. So there's at least one objective in for each of those for the year, which I know typically under 9001 you should have sort of 2 or 3 going at the one active one, and one that you're just finishing, and one that you're about to start. But actually we've stretched those about, and we've got a couple more than that sort of 3, but it's working really well for us. And each member of the management team have taken an objective away and are working on those. So yeah, it seems to be working as it should now, rather than as people felt perhaps that they had to do something to maintain that.
I think that's a perfect example as well of showing how these standards do actually mold and fit in with your business. It's not necessarily that you have to change everything to get these certifications and to have these processes. You've just shown how you've made it work within your company, and I think that's a really great thing. So my final question, obviously apart from the certificate and ticking that box, what other benefits have you found in getting an ISO certification?
I think it gives us the confidence as a business that we're running in the right way. First and foremost, we're confident that we're doing things in an organized fashion, and whilst it often looks like we're pedaling away, there's actually some order to that pedaling. And if honest, when Kathy comes in and we get ourselves as a little bit panicky, we're a business that likes to challenge ourselves and always move forward. And I'm sure when Kathy watches this, she'll laugh, because I don't think she's ever come in for an audit where something hasn't changed. So I think it gives us the reassurance that we're doing things in the right way. Kathy often gives us the reassurance that we're doing things better than we think, which is quite a nice thing as well, because as a business, you can always be quite critical of yourself, can't you? We're not doing things well enough. So actually, it gives us that reassurance. But I think, as I've seen it evolve over certainly the 9001, as it's evolved over the 9 years that I've seen it within the business and been involved with it, it is now a central part of how we manage our business. So it's difficult to sort of say what are the benefits you found of it. I think it's that longevity of having it for so long has made it now the engine of the business. And so, yeah, I don't think we would be able to sort of, of course we would be able to function without it, but would we function in the organized way that we do now? So I don't think there can be much bigger benefit than being an organized business that actually works and operates and runs in a way that it should. And I think, like I say, it's been a slow burner and an evolution of actually the full integration of that system. And I think as people come and go, when it was initially set up, it's always something. And I've been in practices elsewhere where it has been brought in, and everyone always thinks, why should I document what I already do really well? And it's seen as something that's put in the way of you doing your job. But I think as people come and go, and that mentality, it's something that's already within the business when people join, and that's the operating process of how people work. That's just the way the company that you've joined works. So it's not seen as something that's new and a little bit, fill this form in, or I've got to do that, or how do I suggest that we want fluffy toilet roll rather than I don't know why that came to mind, but you know what I mean. As an office suggestion, there are much more business centric ones, but it's just the way we operate now. So I don't think you could pick a much better benefit to having an accreditation and something that guides you in the way that you do your job every day.
I think you kind of said that really succinctly. It's like, it isn't just a certificate that you can hang on your wall and be like, oh, look, we've got this. It's something to help improve your business, streamline your business, streamline your operations. So that is fantastic. Oh,
yeah, and I think that can be that needs to be a long run thing for that team to really embrace it. But we certainly have now.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. I really enjoyed our conversation. I hope you've enjoyed it too.
I have indeed.
Wonderful. So thank you for listening to today's episode. If you have enjoyed it, please rate, review, and subscribe. It always really, really helps the podcast. And I will be back with another episode in a couple of weeks.